Got to the end of it, day 25 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 2, Phase 2. We've been listening to even more lies from Bob Lambert. This afternoon we've been hearing about his involvement, or his denial of involvement, with the Debenhams Sentry device attack. The aftermath of the planting of the devices, and the build-up towards a second wave of Sentry device attacks. He started off, he denied everything. Towards the end, though, when describing how he found out about it, I think things started to unravel quite badly for him. Joe McKay Wilson, what do you make of it?
Well, I mean, first of all, we went through 6 different witnesses from really quite different perspectives. I mean, you've got, like, the women that he was deceiving into relationships, who he told about his involvement with Debenhams. You've got the people who were in the cell with him, who obviously knew about his involvement. But you've also got kind of casual bystanders that he has drawn into this. And so there were 6 witnesses in total who've all given evidence that they knew before it was happening, that Bob Lambert had talked to them about it, expressed his anxieties, talked about what the plans were. They knew, like, quite a lot of details about what it was. He says they're all lying because they want revenge. But, you know, this is not a tight-knit group of people who all hang out together and know each other. These are 6 quite disparate witnesses.
Including an omnivore.
But yeah, so... yeah, but I mean, certainly including people who were not ALF activists, who did not actually support the action that he was taking, who say that they tried to talk him out of it at the time. Obviously, he wasn't talked out of it because, you know, he was an undercover cop, he wasn't an activist. Maybe if he had been an anxious activist talking to him about it, they might have talked him out of it, but he was hell-bent, from what they're saying. Anyway, we went through quite a long and... you know, basically all of that evidence was presented to him and he was just, no, that's lies. And he was asked to say why all these witnesses were saying stuff against him. And he did that thing where he says, well, I could speculate, but I doubt you want me to. And it was like, no, we do actually want you to give us the reasons, any reasons why you think all 6 of these people would be lying about you. Apparently, they're all malicious. He wouldn't go so far as to say that Jackie was malicious.
I mean, he actually said, I don't think she was malicious, but I kind of suggest he didn't really know if she was or not.
Yeah, anyway, they're all liars, they're all out for revenge. It wasn't very credible. And then we get on to this quite complex bit of unpicking Lambert's reporting around the event. So Lambert, there's like a whole bit of a gap in his reporting, about a month I think, of just gap in his reporting, which isn't really explained. He claims that in this time he may not even have been around, he didn't notice anything strange. It wasn't until the Debenhams action happened that he suddenly became aware that something was going on. I mean, this is nonsense because his last report, a month before the event, mentions the possibility of an incendiary device campaign. Seems like he discovers there's going to be an incendiary device campaign and then on his account goes on holiday for a month, comes back and they tell him all about it. So the day after the attack, his account is Jeff Shepherd starts telling him about what happens. Within 24 hours he files his first report. And the interesting thing about his reporting is, although he's saying that he had no contact with Andrew Clark, that he was getting all this information from Jeff Shepherd, in the beginning he says that Andrew Clark planted the Luton device, I think, and that there were 2 other devices planted, but at the moment he doesn't know the identities of who planted them. Which is completely absurd if he's getting this information from Jeff Shepherd. Completely absurd if he was part of the cell as well. Basically, the evidence is that he was drip-feeding information to his handlers. Now, Bob pointed out there's an active counter-terror investigation into this massive fire that caused £9 million worth of damage. Surely you ought to have been giving them all the information you had. Lambert agrees. I was giving them all the information I had. All I knew was that Andrew Clark... I mean, it's just nonsense. It's nonsense that Jeff Shepherd would have gone to him the day after and said Andrew Clark did it, and not talked about his own role. So yeah, it really doesn't hold water.
I mean, particularly as well because the report also features a list of 22 names whose homes should be raided. Doesn't include Andrew Clark on Jeff Shepherd on that list either. Doesn't include Paul Gravitt on that list. The two people who he's admitted he was closest to, who were involved in ALF activism.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's and then we get on to the later reporting where he's suddenly getting all this information and he has to explain why he was being given all this information. He's given various reasons for that. He says, well, because I was a driver, because I was going to be the press officer, and then they're like, well, maybe not the press officer, but I was good at spreading the information around inside the movement. It's just like, why on earth would you tell someone who was a known gossip? Anyway, he kind of tries to imply that his role is going to be basically inciting people to do similar actions. Not being involved in the action, but taking the information about it and telling everybody. Barr kind of points out that this in itself is quite a big deal. Oh, but I knew I'd never have to do it. And then he kind of backtracks on that. Why? Because they were going to be arrested. Oh, no, well, not necessarily. And the whole thing is like, basically, whichever way he plays it, he has either been involved in getting these people arrested, but he wasn't filing reports of evidential standard. There was never any intention to disclose his role to the trial, or he had no role whatsoever, or he was just a driver. Being a driver on an arson attack is not a minor participation. I mean, it's this bizarre idea that the Spycops seem to have that so long as they're only the driver, they're all right. Anyway, it's very convoluted because he's lying, and it doesn't make sense.
It's incredibly convoluted. I mean, this idea of this sort of like official team gossip. I mean, it's what on earth he was. I mean, this was a period of his answers which went full rambling word salad mode. I mean, it was really difficult to understand what on earth he was saying. I was writing down what he was saying like verbatim, and it was just like, this is not making any sense. He started about 12 or 13 sentences without finishing more than 3 or 4 words in each, and then just almost changing the subject entirely. It was clearly a man who was desperately casting around for something to say. Within that, he said that he wasn't the only one who had access, and then Barr goes, well, who else had access? What do you mean access? And then he had to be repeated back to him what he just said. And he just looked terrified, like, shit, I shouldn't have said that. And then, I mean, again, another batch of word salad that meant nothing whatsoever. Really, really not... I mean, I've said this quite a lot of times about him as a witness. Not at all credible. No,
he's really not credible. But, this is where we get the value of the contemporary documents. We've already established that Lambert's reporting was a little bit random, not to say complete fantasy, but what we get here is randomness that doesn't make sense, doesn't add up with his explanation of what was going on, and that's where it starts to get a bit interesting. It's a shame that this section of the questioning wasn't live streamed. I'm not sure why it wasn't. I didn't really see any...
There was, on a couple of the documents, we saw some unredacted names which are now subject to a reporting restriction order. I think that was what it was.
But they could have just not shown the documents on the screen. And anyway, it's a shame because I think that this, as I say, it's complex, it's convoluted, but it is the bit where you get to actual evidence of that his story doesn't add up. It's not just their word against his. It's like, it doesn't make sense. The only explanation that really makes sense is that Lambert had all the information and he was choosing which bits to drip feed. There's some complex questions that arise around this thing about Paul Gravitt. So that we've heard evidence that some members of the cell, after Gravitt failed to plant his devices, some members of the cell wanted him out, and Lambert said, no, he's got to stay in. There's the point that you made about the fact that neither Shepherd nor Gravitt were on the list of possible names of people. Bob Robinson was, incidentally. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff around how he was playing it. We've already come up against this thing of him using other people's names to cover his own role. It raises questions for me about whether he actually intended to do that snitch jacketing thing that we've seen him do in the past, that maybe in order to cover his undercover role, he was kind of keeping some cards up his sleeve to be able to play, like, Gravitt was the informer or whatever in order to cover what he was doing. But you know, it doesn't make sense. But what it does show is that his explanations for stuff really are nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I was, you know, after like wishing for the end of this week's evidence quite hard, as we actually got to the end of the day, it was really frustrating because this felt like a part where, you know, Barr had him on the ropes and he was desperately casting around for what to say. And then it had to come to an end, which was kind of irritating as it turned out, which... because I think he'd been so consistent throughout the day of not letting anything go. You know, when he was being asked about the actual plot to put the devices in Debenhams, when he was towards the end, he obviously hadn't prepared himself for that. He kept saying that he hadn't read the document the first time he'd seen it. He pointed out, no, you have seen it before. You were given this witness statement before you wrote your own witness statement, so you could respond to it. In fact, you mention it in your witness statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just farcical. He showed a real lack of self-respect, I thought. He completely debased himself, really, in front of the hearing. Just making himself out to sound like a complete idiot. It was really pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, that's your last line of defence, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I didn't catch when they're going through this stuff. Did they actually look at some of... Because obviously we've seen some of the interviews conducted by Operation Sparkler. Obviously Lambert himself was interviewed quite extensively by Operation Sparkler. I don't know if any of that has come into the evidence.
I think his written statement maybe was from Operation Sparkler. I can't think, to be honest.
Because it's going to be interesting if we do get a chance to look at the interviews that he gave with Operation Sparkler. I've read some of these internal police on police investigations, and they're really quite chummy.
Yeah.
Unlike what's currently going on with Barr and Lambert. But they will have gone over the same stuff, and I think it would be interesting to compare transcripts of these interviews with transcripts of those interviews. But I don't know whether that evidence is going to be released. So
it's hard to know. I mean, the inquiry has been so late in releasing so many documents. I mean, perhaps we'll find out one day, but who knows when.
I might go and have a trawl through the 700 or so documents that have been released this week and see what's in it.
I hope you've got a fun weekend planned, because kids doesn't sound that much fun. In terms of weekend plans, I normally in the evening I'll do Twitter Spaces. This week, today, I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'll do it on Saturday because I've got a weekend off, and I really don't want to do it this evening. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No. Watch this space on Tuesday. Hopefully, we'll be coming back to where we left off. I think this is a really interesting bit. Yeah.
Lambert's back on Tuesday. On Monday, we're hearing from Callum and Walter, who are both something to do with the Hunt Saboteurs Association, Hunt Sabs, and then it's Lambert again. Then it seems like Lambert's going to come back again on Wednesday for like 1 hour at the start of the day.
So my understanding is that there's going to be questioning of Lambert by the other side potentially, and that is being scheduled for Wednesday morning. Right.
Yeah. So I mean, he's gone from originally he was only going to be 4 days. It's 6 and a bit now. So but thanks for joining. I'm really behind on my weekly updates of like just kind of putting things together, but I'll try and do one this weekend. If not, please feel free to buy me a coffee anyway. I could really do with the support. All right. Thanks for joining. See you all soon.